Hey guys, if you want to hear my thoughts on the WWE firings that took place yesterday, head on over to my Patreon, link in the description. I have a free piece of audio that you can listen to where I give my thoughts. It's completely free, anyone can listen to it, it's public, and if you do want to donate to my Patreon to see more exclusive content, please do consider it, as it would be very helpful to me during these trying times. But let's just get into the video. What's going on, guys? It's Tom or Topson Wrestling, and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be discussing the top 5 craziest people slash wrestlers slash wrestling personalities that TNA nearly signed, and I'm sure the thumbnail and title probably spoil some of the people on this list, but regardless, there are some very interesting people to talk about. Before we do get into it though, be sure to subscribe with notifications on. According to my analytics, the majority of you guys watching these videos aren't actually subscribed, so help me out and subscribe as I'm trying to hit 200k. It'd mean the world to me, but let's just get into the video. Let's stop wasting time. Number 5, CHYNA. I'm talking about CHYNA first because I already discussed this in my latest video about CHYNA in TNA, which you can check out. After 9 years away from the business, CHYNA made her return to wrestling on the May 12th episode of TNA Impact, being revealed as Kurt Angle's partner to face Jeff and Karen Jarrett at Sacrifice. And at Sacrifice, CHYNA would get in the ring with Jarrett, renewing their old rivalry, and would hit the pedigree on Karen and tap her out with the Angle Lock. It was an awesome moment. However, this would be CHYNA's only ever appearance for TNA, as shortly after, her and TNA severed ties. Supposedly, TNA and CHYNA were working towards signing her for a long-time deal where she would possibly become a part of the TNA Knockouts division, and apparently they were very close to getting a deal signed, but the deal would only be signed under one condition. You see, before coming to TNA, CHYNA was in the adult film industry, and TNA said that if she was to release her second Oomph tape, you know what I'm talking about, then she would never work for the company again. And she released it, deleting any possibility of her working for TNA. It is a total shame that CHYNA and TNA never reached an agreement. Though CHYNA was quite rusty in the tag match, she could have been great use to Knockouts division and could help draw for them and help them backstage. I mean, imagine her against the likes of Awesome Kong, Gail Kim, Tara. I mean, maybe she could have just wrestled with the men like she did in the WWE. And it is a shame because we'll never know. Number 4, Paul Heyman. At one point in 2010, TNA really wanted to sign Paul Heyman to help them backstage. In 2010, Heyman had been out of the wrestling business for 4 years after he was fired from the WWE following the disaster that was ECW's December to Dismember pay-per-view. This is a quote from Dave Meltzer, who discusses just how much TNA and Spike TV wanted him. Quote, "Spike TV wanted it really bad. Even though Heyman and Spike, when Spike was a national network, they had a lot of problems, and he made Spike out to be the enemy and things like that for his own storylines, and they probably weren't happy with that. But at the same time, I think that they knew Paul was smarter than most, and probably would do well as the head of creative. It was close enough to where Dixie Carter really believed Heyman was gonna come. In his mind, he had his certain things that he wanted. The key one that I remember him saying was that he basically went to Dixie and was like, alright, of all the guys you have over the age of 40, we're gonna keep one, and you pick because I don't care which one you keep, but I only want one. At that point, things looked bad because Dixie didn't understand why he would want that. Paul Heyman supposedly wanted complete control over TNA and wanted to start a new beginning for the company, getting rid of older wrestlers and pushing younger talent. However, that would be pretty difficult given the fact that the older wrestlers were TNA's main eventers and were pretty much their biggest draws, and that Hulk Hogan was in the company at this time and wasn't going to let anyone else have control other than him. 2 years later, in 2012, he had returned to the WWE as Brock Lesnar's manager, and any talk of him going to TNA were out of the window. But speaking of Brock Lesnar, number 3, Brock Lesnar. I had to say it like Paul Heyman, I'm sorry. But after leaving the WWE and not going anywhere in the NFL, Brock Lesnar began wrestling in Japan, and in 2007, PW Insider reported that TNA and Brock Lesnar were in talks, and it seems that an agreement was quite close to being made, as TNA was trying to sign him into the company as Impact was being expanded to 2 hours on Spike TV. Kurt Angle had apparently had long conversations with Brock in Japan about joining the company, and it's also said that Brock had travelled down to Nashville, Tennessee for a meeting with the company about joining them, but of course it wasn't meant to be. Lesnar would not join TNA as he would leave wrestling entirely, temporarily, to get into the MMA world, and in 2008 he joined the UFC, which ironically are a company with a partnership with Spike TV at the time. The TNA YouTube channel even has a video from 12 years ago hyping up Brock with Kurt Angle speaking on it. After a successful UFC career with a world title win behind him, Brock Lesnar returned to WWE on the Raw after WrestleMania 2012, and any run in TNA never happened. Oh, what could have been. So much could have happened with him in TNA. He would have been a huge ratings draw, given that TNA is on Spike and just how popular, UFC is and stuff like that. I really feel like he could have helped TNA actually compete with WWE. I mean, he could have faced Angle again and reignited that feud. He could have faced Sting for the first time, or faced Samoa Joe or AJ Styles years before they would meet in the WWE, but we can only imagine. Number 2, Seth Rollins. In 2010, Seth Rollins nearly made a decision that could have changed the course of his career. In February 2019, Rollins was a guest on the Edge and Christian podcast and recalled how he was very close to signing with TNA. At the time in 2010, Rollins was finishing up with Ring of Honor, where he had been world champion, tag champion, and all in all had had a very successful run. Rollins went on to say this in the podcast: "Terry Taylor calls me and offered me a 3-year deal to come to TNA for substantially much more money and far less dates than I was having to do in Ring of Honor and a much easier style. I was like, oh, this sounds fantastic. Dixie Carter is calling me and is like, Tyler, we want to have you. We're looking to revamp the whole division and the whole company, and we want to make you the face of TNA. I'm like, this might be okay. I have friends there and they're on TV. I get this contract from TNA and they basically agree to it verbally on the phone with Terry Taylor. They fax over the contract, and before I sign it, I call Ring of Honor and let them know what I'm interested in doing with TNA. Ring of Honor is being booked by Jim Cornette at the time, and he lost his mind when I told him I was going to sign with TNA. He was so irate. Nobody gets over in TNA. They get under. He hated it. I sent him the contract to look over. I called Johnny Ace one last time. He doesn't answer. I leave him a voicemail saying, I got this contract from TNA. If I don't hear from you, I'm going there. 10 minutes later, he calls me back. He makes up all these excuses and is like, I'll call you tomorrow around lunchtime. Cornette gets the contract back to me and changes some things in it. I send the new contract to TNA so they can rewrite it, and I'm waiting on this call from John Laurinaitis. He finally calls me back. Meanwhile, Terry is trying to force me to sign this contract. Laurinaitis says, we don't give out jobs, we give out opportunities. We have this opportunity in Florida. It's a developmental deal. Nothing is guaranteed. Immediately, I'm like, I'm in. Rollins would go on to join FCW before it was revamped into NXT, where he would become the first NXT champion, form the Shield, destroy the Shield, and the rest is history. And number 1, Edge. In an episode of Edge and Christian's podcast in August 2017, Christian was talking about his time in TNA. And as we know, Christian had a brilliant run in TNA, and it's widely considered to be a better run than what he had in the WWE. And after Christian finished talking about TNA, Edge went on to reveal something crazy. He said this, quote, there was one point where my contract was coming up and TNA reached out to me, and Christian was there, so they reached out to me and they told me numbers and schedule and all of these things. And for me, at that point, schedule was the thing where I was like, well, that'd be a whole lot easier on the body, because I was getting pretty beat up. It's like Christian said, I started with the WWE in 97. At that point, it was 2008 or 2009. I can't even remember. It's a long time. Now, there were breaks because of injuries, but that was my body saying, take a break, dude, and I never did something until broke. The idea that Christian was there and the opponents if I went there, there's Samoa Joe, there's AJ Styles, there's a lot of fresh things to do, but for whatever reason, from day one, WWE felt like my home. It felt like the place that I'd always wanted to get to. I did those 2 TV matches in WCW against Kevin Sullivan and Meng, and within 5 minutes of walking into that locker room, I was like, I don't want to be here. I could tell this is not the place for me, and the dream was still WWF and getting there. And then finally, seeing the inner workings and then working into a position where I was one of the main event guys and I was factored in, it just felt like they did put that faith in me. That they did pull the trigger with me for whatever reason they did. And I felt like I can't look that gift horse in the mouth. And sure, there was work involved, but I gotta stick it out on here, and I gotta stay here. I just want my career to be here and nowhere else. But for Christian, I do believe that was definitely the right thing to do. So basically what Edge said was that TNA offered him a contract, he was very tempted to go, but WWE was his home and he didn't want to betray them after all they had done for him, so fair enough. But again, imagine what could have been. Anyway guys, thanks for watching this video. If you did enjoy, then be sure to smack that like button. Check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/TopSendWrestling. Link is in the description. Thank you for all the support on the videos as of late, it means the world. Follow me on Twitter at TopSendWrestling. Subscribe and notifications on. My Instagram is at I'mTomBell. Goodbye and keep on rolling.